was supposed to be done when Clarides was president, and when the question would have been linked to joining the European Union, I have no doubt that the result would have been the other way around in the same percentage. And that, I think, the blame for that not happening was on Mr. Demirtas.
But that was precisely how the Semitic government had decoupled that particular issue.
Yeah.
They said, forget about it. At the end of the day, they are the victims. We cannot have this. And of course, given that he had the power of blocking anything else, the other sequence to have Cyprus joining as they did. So it was not, I mean, it could not have been put along these lines, as it were.
But now, shall we start, Robert?
That's fine.
And Robert doesn't need an introduction because you all know, so I'm not going to say anything. Can we just start straight away?
Okay.
We'll see how it goes.
I'll apologise to begin with if I stumble at all. I've been to the optometrist earlier today and I've still got the residue of drops. You'll see I've printed in very large letters that I'm still a bit fuzzy. When I did this, got the request from Zenon to do this, he asked me if I would do the state of Greek-Turkish economic relations. And I said, I'm not sure we can do that narrowly. And he said, well, okay, let's do state of Greek-Turkish relations. And as you'll see as I present the paper, about half of it is economic relations, so there was more there than I realized. This talk will focus on the rapprochement process initiated between Greece and Turkey in 1999. It will not deal with the issue of the minorities, the Roman Greek community in Turkey and the Muslim Turkish community in Greece, nor will it deal in any detail with the issue of Cyprus. The focus will be on bilateral Greek-Turkish issues in the Aegean, and within that context, the subset of developments in non-contentious areas of mutual concern, including cooperation in fields such as the economy, energy, and communications. The two countries' outstanding differences in the Aegean are well known. They include delineation of the continental shelf, determination of territorial waters and airspace, demilitarization of islands, and sovereignty over uninhabited islets. The Greek side insists that there are no outstanding issues save the matter of the continental shelf, and that this should be adjudicated by the International Court of Justice at The Hague. Turkey argues that there needs to be a political dialogue to resolve all outstanding matters as a package, an approach which Greece believes to have been artificially manufactured in order to introduce irrelevant elements and to challenge its sovereignty in the Aegean. The two nations have twice come near to hostilities over elements of the disputes, the first time in 1987 over the issue of oil exploration outside the 6-mile limit, and the second in 1996 over the sovereignty of the uninhabited islets, specifically of the island close offshore Turkey, known as Imia to the Greeks and Kardak to the Turks. In both instances, hostilities were prevented through the intervention of the NATO High Command, though in the latter case it also required the personal intervention of the US President. The Aegean impasse has prevailed for 35 years, ever since oil was first discovered offshore the island of Thasos in 1973. Greek and Turkish positions on the issues are fixed. Indeed, some of you who have heard me speak before may remember my quoting a senior Greek foreign ministry official some years ago as saying that Greek relations with Turkey were the most stable in the region. They have their positions, we have ours, and nothing is about to change them. An earlier effort at rapprochement was initiated in 1988 by the governments of Andreas Papandreou and Turgut Özal. The format was broadly the same as today's. Two interministerial committees were established, one to identify substantial differences on sovereignty issues, and the other to consider ways of confidence building through economic and cultural contacts. The process culminated in a summit meeting between Papandreou and Özal in Athens in the summer of 1988, but virtually nothing came of it, and the process gradually withered. On that occasion, the show of amity had been largely cosmetic on both sides, with Papandreou seeking to divert attention from mounting domestic political problems, and Özal seeking to bolster Turkey's image in its first bid for EU accession that had been launched in 1987, but which ultimately was rejected by the Commission in 1989 on the grounds that the country was not ready either economically or politically. The current rapprochement process is much more serious and is buttressed by the fact that it dovetails with a significant change in the Greek attitude towards Turkey becoming a member of the European Union. The present process arose from yet another crisis in Greek-Turkish relations in February 1999. In a diplomatic fiasco of the highest order, Greece was discovered to be harboring at its embassy in Kenya Turkey's #1 nemesis, the Kurdish guerrilla leader Abdullah Öcalan. In a murky follow-up, Öcalan was captured by Turkish special forces while ostensibly being given safe passage from the Greek embassy to a plane that would carry him to another country of refuge. Greek-Turkish relations plummeted to a nadir of acrimony. They were salvaged only through the foresight of the country's two foreign ministers, Ismail Cem and George Papandreou. In May that year, Cem wrote Papandreou suggesting talks to deal with the perception in Turkey that Greece systematically encouraged what he styled terrorism in Turkey. Papandreou agreed, but suggested that this be done in the context of the EU's so-called third pillar of justice and home affairs. He suggested that the agenda, as well as including terrorism, should incorporate mutual efforts to combat organized crime, drug trafficking, and illegal migration. Moreover, Papandreou recommended that efforts be made to strengthen bilateral cooperation in the areas of trade, tourism, culture, and the environment. Cem concurred, and the present rapprochement process was born. Popular suspicion about the process was overridden by mutual outpourings of sympathy on the part of the Greek and Turkish public and media in the wake of the disastrous earthquakes which hit Turkey and Greece respectively in August and September 1999. The overtures coincided with a significant shift in Greek foreign policy towards Turkey's nomination as a candidate for membership of the European Union. Prior to 1996, Greece had gone out of its way to be obstructionist. However, the Emiya-Kardak confrontation had made it abundantly clear to Greece that it had no military allies in its disputes with Turkey and could not prevail in the event of hostilities. From this, an awareness gradually evolved that it would be far better off were Turkey inside the European Union, shaping and adopting policies according to the EU principles of compromise and accommodation. Not least of the practical considerations arising from the Greek point of view was that Turkish membership would require the country, when it accepted the acquis communautaire, also to accept the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, with its provisions for 12-mile territorial waters. Turkey, by the way, is not a signatory to that convention. A policy line was developed in Athens to the effect that provided Cyprus was allowed to become one of the countries admitted to the EU in the next round of enlargement, regardless of whether or not it remained divided, and provided Turkey would agree to address outstanding issues, Greece would drop its opposition to Turkey's accession and indeed promote it. Not only was this seen to be in Greece's own best interests, but it also meant that other EU member states opposed to Turkish entry, such as France and Austria, could no longer hide behind Greek objections. At the Helsinki Council of Ministers in December 1999, Greece got virtually everything it wanted. The EU accepted Turkey as a candidate, but pointedly stipulated that all candidates should make every effort to resolve any outstanding border dispute and related issues, or, within a reasonable time, bring those disputes to the International Court of Justice for resolution. The Council said it would review its decision at the end of 2004, effectively giving Greece and Turkey a 5-year horizon in which to settle their differences or to have the ICJ do it for them. In the event in 2004, Greece, highly embarrassed by the Greek Cypriot rejection of the Annan Plan, particularly after Turkey had so openly endorsed it, did not press on the end of 2004 deadline for referral to the ICJ, and in December that year, Athens acquiesced in the EU offering Turkey a date for accession negotiations, October 2005, subject to review. There is some evidence to suggest that Greece got cold feet about forcing the issue of the referral to the ICJ, realizing that its judgments are often based on compromise, which could well mean Greece having to make some concessions that would be domestically, politically unpalatable. The Karamanlis government, therefore, has preferred to emphasize the rapprochement process hoping that improved bilateral relations in socio-economic spheres will, over time, lead Turkey to become more accommodating over the sovereignty matters. It's a long-term game plan, particularly as Turkey has been told that it will not be accepted for EU membership before 2014. Throughout this period, Greece retains the fallback position that it can, within certain political limits, exercise its veto over the Turkish accession process. As in 1988, the present rapprochement exercise is divided into two parts. There are diplomatic contacts designed to explore possible mutually agreed solutions to the outstanding Aegean issues, or at least an acceptable common case to be put to the ICJ if it comes to that. And there are political and civil society initiatives on a wide range of economic, security, and cultural cooperation under the guidance of a joint steering committee. In parallel with the diplomatic contacts, there have been military meetings fostered by NATO with a view to creating confidence-building measures that will help forestall any future confrontations. The diplomatic contacts began at the level of department head and have gradually been elevated to that of secretaries general, with the occasional involvement of ministers. Since 1999, there have been a total of 37 meetings, which have resulted in the adoption of 24 military confidence-building measures. These have included such things as formalized meetings at the highest level of the general staffs, mutual visits by commanders working on the Thracian land border, the establishment of hotlines to be used in the event of crises, and exchanges of observers at military exercises. Decisions finalized in January this year increased the level of cooperation to the creation of joint military units to operate in a NATO context. For example, there is to be a joint unit to support NATO peacekeeping missions in areas such as Kosovo, and there is to be the creation of a joint rapid reaction force to be deployed by NATO on so-called problematic missions, i.e. in combat zones such as Afghanistan. A third joint military force is being established to deal with natural disasters, rescue, and humanitarian aid missions. While such confidence-building measures do not address the core sovereignty issues, they do improve the level of understanding between the country's potential combatants in a way that it is designed to diffuse crises which should, over time, help to keep the peace. On the civilian side of the equation, the agenda is not quite, but almost, open-ended, and the two sides have signed 33 cooperation agreements and protocols covering prosaic but immensely practical issues such as mutual promotion and protection of investments, the avoidance of double taxation, an increase in the number of transit passes available to road hauliers, and the relaxation of visa rules. There have been media projects to try to temper bias in reporting of activities in each other's country. There is a general perception today that the EMEA-Kardak confrontation was an artificial crisis engendered by irresponsible journalists from both countries. There are committees working to neutralize school textbooks by recasting disparaging portraits of each other's history and the acts of leading protagonists. This, though, is a particularly neuralgic area, as witnessed by the furore that blew up in Greece last year over a new textbook, which played down atrocities and sufferings in the Asia Minor campaign in order to concentrate on factual details, only to have to be recalled following a vociferous outcry by nationalist groups spurred on by the church. Non-governmental organizations have been working at common environmental projects, and there have been a number of transnational cultural ventures, including concerts, art exhibitions, at least one film about Greek memories of Istanbul, and a drama series for Turkish television portraying a mixed Turkish-Greek marriage. Efforts to adopt common policies to combat crime and to prevent illegal immigration have proved less successful than these civilian ventures. The Greeks believe that Turkey has not done enough to clamp down on immigrant smuggling, and that Turkey has fallen short on its obligations to take back arrested illegal migrants, even when it can be proven that they started their passage to Greece from Turkish territory. That said, there has been success in joint actions to reduce criminal activity, particularly narcotics trafficking. The most significant advances, however, have been in the realm of business relations. And much of the information that I will present here comes from a recent paper prepared by Konstantin Papadopoulos for the Southeast European Studies program at Oxford. Mr. Papadopoulos, a former Greek diplomat, is now an advisor on European affairs for for Greece's third largest commercial bank, EFG Eurobank, and he has kindly agreed that I should make use of the information. And for any of you who want to see the original paper, I commend it to you highly. It's a very, very detailed paper. It's in the Southeast European Studies at Oxford series. It's called Greek Turkish Economic Cooperation, Guarantor of Detente or Hostage to Politics. You can reach it on the St. Anthony's College website. I've got the note of the website address here for afterwards if anybody wants to get it from me.
Could you read it out for us?
It's www.sant.ox. Sorry about my eyes. www.sant.ox.ac.uk/ext/sesox, SEESOX. And on the site at the moment they also have two other papers. One about public opinion and its effect on Turkey's application for EU membership, and another one on the South Stream pipeline deal, which I will speak about in a little while. These latter two are short opinion pieces. This is a long and very detailed and very sophisticated analysis of Greek-Turkish economic relations, and I am not going to do it justice here because I don't have enough time. Trade between Greece and Turkey, which in the decade prior to the rapprochement process had been growing at around $60 million a year, until it stood at approximately $950 million in the year 2000, forged ahead in the years after at annual rates close to $160 million a year, that's nearly 3 times as much, over the next 6 years, to stand at approximately $2.75 billion in 2006. Political and business figures from both countries repeatedly have forecast that it will double again to around $5 billion, although they cautiously don't say when this will be. Last year, trade growth plateaued with a volume flat at around $2.7 billion, roughly the same as in 2006. Opinions are divided as to whether this represents a ceiling on capacity or whether it simply reflects the tougher economic climate of the past 18 months. Depending upon the year, the goods trade balance has been some 2/3 to 3/5 in Turkey's favor, reflecting that country's much larger manufacturing base compared with Greece. Greek exports have been dominated by petroleum products. Turkey takes nearly a quarter of Greek refinery exports, and by raw cotton shipped to Turkish textile factories, which pay significantly lower wages than those in Greece, and therefore are better at manufacturing the cloths from the raw materials. Other Greek export products have tended to be intermediates such as leather, plastics, and aluminum. By contrast, Turkey's exports to Greece include industrial goods such as iron and steel, and finished products such as machinery, automotive parts, furniture, and other low-end consumer durables such as cheap refrigerators and televisions. And they're not bad. I've got one myself in Athens. They also include ready-made garments, often made from cloth fabricated from Greek raw material. For their part, the Greeks run well ahead of their Turkish counterparts in the provision of services, particularly in the banking and shipping sectors. The National Bank of Greece in 2006 paid $2.77 billion to require 46% of Finansbank, the 8th largest bank in Turkey. And in 2007, NBG paid another $2.25 billion to take its holding to 90%. The other 10% has been offloaded onto multinational, international banks as a sort of comfort operation. This brings the National Bank of Greece investment in Finansbank to a little over $5 billion. The deal prompted considerable adverse comment in Greece, but National's management believes it to have been one of the best moves it's ever made. Last year, Finansbank generated 42% of National Group's consolidated income and more than 52% of its consolidated profits of approximately 950 million euros. That's profits in the first full year of trading, close to 20% of the total investment, which means it's going to be paid back very, very quickly. 2 other Greek banks have taken stakes in smaller Turkish financial institutions. EFG Eurobank paid $182 million to acquire a 70% stake in the 30-branch Tefkan Bank. Tefkin Bank specializes in loans to small and medium-sized enterprises, and EFG has its eye on providing finance for Greek companies expanding into Turkey. This is a tactic it's used very successfully in its expansion in other countries of the Balkans. A second investment was by the Greek franchisee of the Portuguese Millennium Bank, which acquired in 2002 in a liquidation sale a 12-branch Istanbul-based bank, which it has used gradually to roll out a network under the new name Bank Europa. By comparison, the only Turkish banking investment to date in Greece has been the opening of 2 branches by the state-owned agricultural bank Tisi Ziraat Bankası to serve the Muslim community of Komotini. It's not all been smooth sailing for the banking investors. The Turkish Army Pension Fund is reported to have withdrawn its deposits from Finance Bank when it was agreed by the Greeks, when it was acquired by the Greeks. But then the pension fund was also reported to have done the same thing when another Turkish bank was acquired by ING of the Netherlands, so it may be a general chauvinistic point of view and not just one directed against the Greeks. A more worrying development was the rejection last year by the Turkish Banking Regulatory Authority of a deal whereby Greece's second largest bank, Alpha, had acquired 50% of another small bank, Alternatif. This 30-branch bank was owned by an industrial conglomerate, the Anadolu Group, which had no banking experience. Alpha, which admitted that it had no experience of the Turkish market, formed a joint venture with the Turkish group, and both sides seemed highly pleased with the resultant complementary arrangement. It's not clear why the regulator refused to clear the sale. Ostensibly, it was on legal grounds. Alpha claimed quote-unquote political reasons, although it was ambiguous about whether it thought these emanated from the regulator or from its business partners. Another so far unfulfilled venture has been a proposed trade bank, Aegean Business Bank, that is supposed to be financed by the Izmir Chamber of Commerce and by companies that are members of the Greek Turkish Chamber of Commerce, which was formed at the beginning of the decade, not long after the rapprochement process got underway. The business bank project was first mooted in February 2005, but the necessary capital has yet to be raised, with reluctance reportedly greatest on the part of Turkish businessmen. Tracking foreign direct investment is a difficult task at the best of times, and up-to-date figures are difficult to come by. However, figures compiled by Papadopoulos to the end of the first quarter of 2006 suggested a huge disparity in commitments between Greek and Turkish investors. According to his data, less than a dozen Turkish firms had entered the Greek market at that time with investments of around $2.5 million, while some 35 Greek firms had established in Turkey with investments totaling some $60 million, a factor of difference of more than 20. Turkish newspaper accounts earlier this year put the number of Greek firms currently established in that country at around 230, with investments of close to $5.5 billion. However, that total includes the banking investments, which means that business ventures in other sectors are probably worth no more than $300 million, but that's still considerably more than the Turkish investments in Greece, for which I'm afraid I have no update. The disparity between Turkish business interest in Greece and vice versa is largely a matter of business and not political considerations. For Turkish investors, Greece is not a particularly attractive market. It's expensive, the bureaucracy is as bad, if not worse, than at home, and labor costs are high. More tellingly, the Greek market is small, just 11 million. Turkish investors have preferred larger markets in Southeast Europe, particularly in Bulgaria and Romania, the latest entrants into the EU 27. Contrarily, for Greek investors, Turkey represents a low-wage economy and a massive market, nearly 8 times that at home. A large number of Greek firms are reported to be gearing up to invest in Turkey in areas where they believe they can add value by bringing expertise to areas in which Turkey is strong in raw materials. For example, food processing, fish farming, and a number of specialized mining sectors. As part of the rapprochement process, the two sides hold regular meetings of a trade and economic cooperation group. A Turkish-Greek business council, first established 5 years ago within the purview of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Council, was last year formally transformed into an independent Greek-Turkish business council under the aegis of the Federation of Greek Industries and Turkey's Foreign Economic Relations Board. While its focus is on the promotion of bilateral trade and investment, The Greek Turkey Business Council also has a commitment to promote joint expansion into Southeast Europe, the Black Sea region, and the Middle East. An interesting development in this regard is this successful joint venture between the large Greek and Turkish construction companies, Helaktor and Enka, which has won a $950 million contract to construct the first phase of the massive Blue City New Town in Oman. The tourism sector is another area of high potential cooperation, though for the time being it is held back by administrative difficulties. Since 1999, Greek visits to Turkey have multiplied fourfold from around 150,000 to around 600,000 a year, driven by the desire of Greeks to see Istanbul, Constantinople, and archaeological centers with a Greek history such as Ephesus and Cappadocia. However, the number of Turkish visitors to Greece has been limited to around 50,000 because of the Schengen requirements that Turks as non-EU citizens must have visas. There was also, until recently, an expensive departure tax from Turkey. In November 2006, the tourism ministers of Greece and Turkey agreed a memorandum providing for more ferry and air connections between Greece and Turkey, and the defense ministries of both countries have declared a moratorium on military exercises during the summer. The travel associations of the two countries, Hatta and Tursab, have signed a bilateral agreement designed to provide joint tourism packages. Papadopoulos in his paper cites data which suggests that if Turkey could attract on a side trip just 10% of the annual visitors to Greece, this would mean it would attract an extra 1.4 million visitors a year, a 7% increase for Turkey, while conversely, if Greece could attract the same 10% of visitors from Turkey, it would boost total arrivals to Greece by 2 million visitors, which would be a 14% increase for Greece. First, however, the visa problems have to be overcome. A pilot scheme providing an exemption for day trips between eastern Greek islands and the Turkish mainland was tried, but it had to be abandoned. And again, I'm sorry, I don't have the details of why it was abandoned, but it would seem that it simply was incompatible with the details of Schengen. The state tourism authorities of both countries are working towards creating common standards for facilities and for accreditation of outlets, with a view to eventually promoting the joint package notion. And this is a particularly attractive idea in the Aegean, where you could have sailing holidays using both Turkish ports and Greek islands, and short-term stays on the mainland for people who stay on the Turkish mainland visiting Greek islands, and vice versa. It's eminently sensible if the problems of the administrative problems can be overcome. The rapprochement process has helped to promote a number of new communications links between the two countries, although these would probably have been developed regardless. In 2004, the Greek and Turkish transport and telecommunications ministers agreed a memorandum of understanding for the extension of the ACGTA Odos. This is this major highway that's running from Igoumenitsa on the Adriatic coast to Kipi on the Evros River border with Turkey. They agreed a memorandum for the extension of the ACGTA Odos from the Greek border, where it currently terminates at Kipi, for a further 253 kilometers to Istanbul. The link, when finished, is supposed to include a motorway and double-tracked electrified railway lines. In autumn 2004, a direct rail service was inaugurated from Thessaloniki to Istanbul, and late last year, the two countries agreed to facilitate these links through the construction of a second bridge across the Evros River that will parallel the current link at Kipi-Ipsala. There have also been links in the energy sector. As with communications, these would probably have developed regardless of the rapprochement process, but they have been facilitated by it. The Greek and Turkish electricity systems have been interconnected through a 400 kilovolt high tension link with a total transfer capacity of 1 gigawatt or 1,000 megawatts. This gives Greece access to vital electricity supplies of which it is currently in short supply, and gives Turkey access to the wider European grid. Only a couple of weeks ago, the Greek and Turkish grid operators signed an agreement whereby Greece will, over the next 2 years, draw 200 megawatts a year of Turkish power during the summer months, while supplying a comparable amount to Turkey during the winter months. The Greek electricity company is desperately counting on this power to help prevent brownouts and blackouts this summer because of a severe shortage of domestic generating capacity. In November last year, Greece and Turkey inaugurated a new natural gas pipeline link from Karacabey on the Dardanelles to Komotini in Thrace. The Greek Public Gas Corporation, DEPA, which currently relies on Gazprom of Russia for some 80% of its gas supplies, has been looking to diversify its sources and has signed a contract with Turkish BOTAŞ to take 750 million cubic meters of pipeline gas a year from 2007 until 2022. Some of this will come from the Shah Deniz field in Azerbaijan and some from Russia via its Blue Stream submarine pipeline that links it with Turkey under the Black Sea. The Greek Turkish interconnector is supposed to form the first leg of a longer pipeline that will traverse the whole of northern Greece to the Adriatic coast and then link with Italy via a 212-kilometer submarine pipeline. This is a long-term project between DEPA and the Italian energy company Edison, and it's due for completion sometime in 2011 or 2012, although we'll see. It's not yet clear what the ramifications may be of the decision by Greece earlier this year to link to Russia's South Stream gas pipeline project. This is a scheme agreed in 2007 by Gazprom of Russia and Eni of Italy to provide gas to northern Italy via a pipeline through Bulgaria, Serbia, Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina to a terminus near Trieste. The final form of the South Stream project has yet to be fixed, and there is a prospect that it could also follow a northwestern route to take gas through Slovenia and Hungary to Austria. The Greek participation in South Stream would be a spur that would expand its domestic capacity and link to the northern transit pipeline, providing extra gas for sale to the Fyrom and to Albania. South Stream will provide competition to the proposed Nabucco pipeline, a massive EU-promoted project designed to provide alternative sources of natural gas for Northern Europe, whose supplies are currently dominated by those from Gazprom. The Nabucco pipeline is supposed to run approximately 3,300 kilometers from Erzurum in Turkey to the Baumgarten gas storage center in Austria. The project is budgeted at some 5 billion euros and is designed to have an annual capacity of 31 billion cubic meters. It's supposed to deliver gas from as far away as Azerbaijan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and later Iraq and Egypt. The Nabucco scheme is bogged down in political and financing disputes, and if South Stream gets off the ground before Nabucco, it could call into question the viability of Nabucco. This would compromise Turkey's efforts to become an energy transit hub for Europe, and to a certain degree, although not entirely, shift the hub focus westwards into Greece. It's too early yet to appreciate properly what the fallout will be from the Greek decision to tap into South Stream. The practical side of the rapprochement process has been reinforced at the political level by a steady stream of contacts between ministers paying mutual visits to ratify various agreements. Added impetus has been given by high-level contacts at the level of foreign minister and prime minister. Abdullah Gül, as foreign minister, visited Greece in 2003, and Ali Babacan visited last year. Petros Mouraviatos visited Turkey in 2005, and Dora Bakoyani has been twice to Turkey, in 2006 and again in March this year. Prime Minister Erdogan visited Greece in 2004, the first visit by a Turkish premier to Greece in 16 years, and Prime Minister Karamanlis visited Turkey this January, the first visit by a Greek premier to Turkey in 49 years, the last being by his late uncle, also Kostas Karamanlis. Personal contacts have played a significant role in the rapprochement process. Cem and Papandreou shared left-of-centre views and developed a strong personal relationship in parallel with their political contacts. Erdogan and Karamanlis are said to have excellent personal rapport. Indeed, Erdogan asked Karamanlis to stand witness at his daughter's wedding, though there was an element of statesmanship in this, as well as political leaders from several other neighbouring countries also served as witnesses. Nevertheless, a combination of good relations and goodwill have fostered and promoted the process, and one can only hope that if the Justice and Development Party is dissolved by the Constitutional Court and that the AKP government falls, that it will not be replaced by a party hostile to the rapprochement process. So, to recap, the Turkish-Greek rapprochement process has set to one side the long-standing sovereignty disputes in the Aegean without ignoring them, and pragmatically got on with improving relations in socio-economic fields. The results of the social and cultural contacts are hard to quantify, but they would appear to be nonetheless real. I was particularly struck, for example, by the fact that the English language version of Greece's premier newspaper, Kathimerini, consigned much of its coverage of Karamanlis's visit to Turkey in January to the English language newspaper, the Turkish Daily News. It gave, needless to say, a decidedly different perspective on the Karamanlis than what one might have expected to have found. The justice and home affairs aspects, which were the genesis of the rapprochement, have perhaps been less successful than hoped, particularly as regards issues of illegal migration, where the Greeks feel their Turkish counterparts are not doing sufficient to prevent it and not assuming their responsibilities once it's discovered. But on the business and financial front, there have been extensive developments in trade of goods and services, foreign direct investment and tourism, and in communications and energy links. In less than a decade, trade volumes have increased 3 to 4-fold, and investment volumes 10-fold, maybe more. The nominal values are still small, particularly when one takes into consideration the proximity of the two countries, but it must be remembered that the comparisons start from a very small, almost negligible base, and there are practical business reasons why they are not greater, particularly from the Turkish perspective. The interdependence will, over time, make it difficult for the business communities of the two countries to disengage, and it will provide a powerful lever to prevent politicians embarking upon any future confrontations. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for a detailed, well-researched, thoughtful paper. And I don't really have anything else to say myself, but do you have any questions or comments? I did make a note of something I wanted to ask.
Robert, if I could, it's interesting how Turkey, before the more recent expansion of the EU, why Turkish businesses weren't more proactive to locate offices in Athens as footholds into the EU. I mean, you mentioned that there's investment in, I think, Bulgaria and Romania, but there would seem to be on the surface the attraction of peripheral EU countries, sort of off on the map, sort of in the periphery, a way of sort of sneaking in investment as a foothold to sort of invest further into the rest of Europe.
Yeah, I think those few investments that have been made have had that as much in mind as they have had tapping the Greek market. Because the problem is that the Greek market is so small, and they have seen Bulgaria and Romania about to become members of the European Union, and like the Greeks, they have invested heavily in Bulgaria and Romania because they knew that 4 or 5 years down the road they were going to be dealing with yet another EU country, but they would have a foothold there. And so Greece, in some respects, didn't provide a sufficiently large market to justify making the investment there when you could, with a very short time frame, make the same investment in a much, much larger market of Bulgaria and Romania together, and to other countries further north, because there's extensive Turkish investments in Germany and places like this. So that they, Greece, with no disrespect, is something of a backwater. Sorry. And for foreign investors, it's the major problem they have to contend with. It's a very small market,
But it,
Oh.
it didn't market itself as a sort of a window into the EU, which you could have for Turkey, for
Yeah, but
Lebanon,
it's
for
a-
other countries as well.
It's a window into the EU, which for physical goods is very difficult to use because you have to traverse the whole, or you've had to traverse the whole of the Balkans with all the problems in the previous decade at the breakup of Yugoslavia. And not very good communications links through Bulgaria. The rail links to Bulgaria are diabolical. The road links to Bulgaria are only just improving and not much better in Romania. I'm surprised perhaps that there hasn't been some riverine traffic into Romania through the Black Sea. But Greece is a long way away from the centers of Europe, and it's a problem that it has with its own investors, which is why they're anxiously investing closer to the center of Europe.
But it is, you say, trying to be, or might even rival Turkey as a hub for the transportation of gas and petroleum. I think you
Yes.
say that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, how does that marry up with the fact
Well-
that it's a backwater?
Well, it just this is the. I'll say something else first before.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Where Greece shines is in the provision of services, and it's done extremely well in the provision of services and banking particularly. There's something like 1,200 Greek branch banks and 16,000 employees in various countries of the Balkans. And in 2 or 3 of the countries, they are either the leading or the second largest. They have the largest or the second largest market share. One of the ironies is that the National Bank of Greece has the largest market share in the FYROM. Despite this perpetual debate that goes on between them and the antagonism. The question of the energy hub is largely a question of locale. It could be in Turkey, it could be in Greece. Both of them are jockeying for position to be that energy hub.
As rivals.
As rivals, they have to be cooperators, because Greece has no access to energy, whereas Turkey has the access to energy. Turkey has already established links with the Caspian. Turkey already has established links with Iran, and this would be a major development if there weren't the qualms in Europe, driven by American qualms, about doing trade with Iran. Turkey has capacity to trade with Iraq and other nations of the Middle East. So that Turkey, for Greece to be as it were, an elbow in all of this, it has to come through Turkey first. So Turkey is always going to be a major transit center. The question is whether or not it transits west of Greece before it goes north and southwest, or whether they transit directly from Turkey into Europe, heading north.
I see.
And this is where this new development with the South Stream project has kind of put the cat among the pigeons. It looked as though Greece and Turkey had a good thing going, as it were, with gas coming from the Caspian and Iran into Greece and on to Italy and maybe north. Now, the Russians, who are not very happy with that, have said, oh, we're going to have South Stream, which will feed northern Italy in competition, and by the way, Greece, would you like a spur? And Greece says yes, so that feeds this new proposed northern pipeline, and then Greece can trade north into the FYROM and the Albania with Russian gas, as opposed to the gas that would be transiting from Turkey. All of this is highly conditional, because many of the fields in the Caspian are not ready yet. The pipelines are dependent on supply contracts being fixed. The supply contracts are not fixed yet. It's putting together multiple variables, and they haven't all gelled yet. Although the Turkish pipeline and its links with Blue Stream and its links with Iran are in place and could be the nub and the nexus for transit north through Nabucco, but Nabucco has fallen into political a political fray, and the Turks, in some respects, have been their own worst enemies on that one, because the French wanted to take a big piece of that, and Turkey and France had a falling out, and the Turks said that France could not come into the pipeline arrangement.
Well, on purely sort of political grounds.
In that particular instance, yes, and as far as I can see, it was
over the Armenian genocide.
It was over the Armenian genocide issue.
Well, what's the Greek take on the Armenian genocide point? Is there a Greek point?
I think for years now, they've been playing it down and not making any strong point. If you talk to the average Greek, they'll argue that it exists in the same way that there were the problems in Anatolia in the 20s. But I think, to the best of my impression is that the officialdom has played down the whole notion of the Armenian genocide in order to promote relations with Turkey.
But the Greek government in the past has taken the position that there has been a genocide. It's as simple as that. In fact, following that, and also following the events in 1922, most Armenians emigrated to Greece. Greece was the only country to accept the Armenians when everybody else did not want them.
And Papandreou made a big thing about it.
Of course, so the position is perfectly clear. But of course, given that we've got our own problems, the Armenian problem, whilst it is there, is not promoted.
It's played down, so it's not exactly.
Already the Greek parliament has taken that particular position. What more do you want? You don't go out doing
that.
No,
but they don't go on about it, is what I meant.
Well, Greece is hardly in a position to criticize anyone about the treatment of ethnic minorities.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought the other thing I wanted to say, which is a sort of, what's the Greek take on the fear of Islamic fundamentalism in Turkey? I mean, is there any position? Are they concerned, or are they concerned about the other lot, the my lot, the secular lot?
Yeah, I would say that amongst the average citizen, there's no real appreciation. Amongst the elites, there is a feeling that the AKP has provided far more reforms in terms of human rights and political rights than the secular establishment in Turkey ever did. And in fact, the secular establishment has got itself a bad reputation, particularly over this constitutional challenge to the AKP.
Have you heard me on the subject?
I have. I've read your article in the Turkish Daily News, and I disagree with it.
Okay, well, we'll say no more about that.
Oh, no, go on.
No, I disagree with it only because it is...
No, because it's your talk, I don't talk.
No, I disagree with it because you say that nobody is above the law. And my disagreement is that assumes that the law is neutral, and I'm afraid the constitutional provisions are a legacy of the military constitution, and therefore not neutral, and therefore I think subject to challenge.
But there are basic articles in many constitutions which you can't override simply by elections. You can't. I mean, it's basically in the United States. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about Greece and Turkey now. So that was in a. Right. Anyone else? Peter, have you got anything to say?
I just wanted to say that having been in Mytilene a number of times over the last 15 or 20 years, it's always notable that Greek tourist operators are offering day trips or 2-day trips or 3-day trips to Turkey. So that's been going on. I don't know. I imagine it's small numbers. I didn't notice any Turks visiting Mytilene, but I'm not saying it wasn't happening.
This is because of the visa problem. You can, if you are a Greek or an EU citizen, you can travel to Turkey on these day trips or 2 or 3 day trips with no problems. But if you're a Turk or somebody trying to come from Turkey into Greece, Schengen simply requires you to have a visa, which is time-consuming and expensive. And until recently, as I said, there was a very high exit tax to leave Turkey, and so it wasn't a two-way traffic. I'm going to steal a bit of your water.
Yeah, no, you can have all of it, actually.
On that
yes.
visa issue, does the visa have to be time-consuming and expensive? I mean, is it not administratively possible to? I mean, I don't.
Well,
know
it's prior
what
entry.
Schengen-
You see, it's prior entry.
Are we talking about Greece and Turkey, or are we
Yeah.
talking about?
No, generally, the position in
I don't
Schengen is
know.
that if you need to come to a European Union country that is covered by Schengen,
Yeah.
generally speaking, my understanding is that you have to get prior entry clearance, i.e., you go to the embassy beforehand, and then you travel. Whereas if you are Greek or Greek Cypriot even, I have a Greek Cypriot I have a Republic of Cyprus passport, and I go to Turkey and they let me in under some other guise. They call it something else. But what I wanted to ask you about this Schengen, but you see, I mean, I know the United Kingdom is not really part of Schengen, but it is true that lots of European Union countries who are, I think, part of Schengen do have special sorts of relationships in immigration relations with third countries. I mean, does Schengen actually? Because I don't really think Schengen prohibits that.
I'm sure it would be possible to negotiate some sort of a bilateral agreement. But I don't know enough about Schengen to say whether my assumption is correct or not. But I would have thought that if there was an active desire, that some sort of a bilateral concession could be negotiated, and that would seem to be what was being played at when they had the one-day visits. And I'm sorry, it's not an area that I'm sufficiently familiar with.
Well, I used to be familiar with. I think the basic idea of Schengen, as I understand it, is that internally you've got complete freedom of movement, no control at all. But
it's at the border.
Yes, but as part of that deal, you have strict control on the border from third countries. That's the basic principle.
That is precisely
That's the whole.
That's the basic principle.
This is precisely the problem that Turkish nationals face in entering Greece without proper, as it were, clearance.
Yeah.
And I suppose that in these post 7/7 or 9/11 or whatever it is nowadays, these matters have become much more acute, and therefore the countries in the periphery, and Greece obviously is one of them, face additional problems in getting that particular thing clear, so that they are not being accused by the rest of the Schengen countries that you have a very porous border there, you allow all sorts of terrorists coming in, and so on and so forth. So this obviously presents tremendous problems to Turkish nationals who might wish to visit Mytilene or whatever else for a day or two.
Yes.
I just don't know enough about the process aspect of Schengen visas to know whether the EU insists on there being a significant interval between, or whether you could have. I mean, when you enter,
No, you need prior authorization. You need prior entry clearance. You have visa requirements. That means that a prior visa, is mandatory before you set off. The airlines will not take you unless you have.
Okay, so you can't, and you. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that and that's the way they. But
They have essentially to check you against the lists of whatever they are keeping.
and also you have it's common. So basically, Schengen says that they've got to have commonality, so that they apply the same rules. That's sort of level playing field. But so far as Turkey is concerned, I mean, look, I'm sure that sort of most middle-class Turks from Istanbul can travel to Greece without any difficulty at all. I mean, it's.
Well, the numbers would suggest otherwise.
Really?
Well, if it's only 50,000 in a year.
Unless they have got that prior clearance, they can travel.
Yes, but they don't have problems getting it. You see, I know.
No, they don't have problems getting the clearance. It's just that it's too much of a problem for
It's a
many of
hassle.
them to do it. There are more Chinese tourists in Greece than there are Turkish.
Really?
Yeah, far more Chinese
Well, the
tourists.
Chinese are, of course, 1.5 billion.
Well, Greece
So-
happens to be one of the Greece happens to be one of the nominated countries that the Chinese can come to, and there's huge
yes, of course.
numbers of Chinese.
Yeah, and I've seen Chinese people speaking Greek, and it's quite an experience.
We sell them a lot of
actually.
cement. We're one of the top exporters, importers of cement.
Really?
Yeah, massive, massive.
Yeah. But it is quite interesting to see a Chinese person speaking Greek. Actually, I saw 2 or 3 on television. I thought it's great.
I just want to raise a completely non-economic, non-hard data issue.
Cyprus is forbidden, by the way.
No,
It's the elephant in the room.
It's to do with the desire to be a tourist. I mean, the USA notoriously, large numbers of Americans never leave the United States, and they don't leave the United States because there's so much to see on the one hand, but there's a kind of introversion, right? I'm wondering whether there's anything in mainstream Turkish society which feels that you've got everything here and you don't necessarily want to go. I mean, I just raise this question because it's characteristic of, if you look at...
Well, it's not in their nature to travel. Well, they travelled from the steppes of Asia and took over.
I'm going to make an equally generic response
But I
to
mean,
that.
it's a fact about the USA and the issue of...
Sure, no, you're absolutely right, actually. I mean, but that's anyway.
Go on.
Just an equally generic response that, in my limited experience, most Turks are urban tourists, and the monuments and things that they might wish to visit in Turkey tend not to be in Greece. I mean, tend not to be in major urban centres outside of Thessaloniki. They're in smaller towns in Komotini and in Epirus and Thrace and Macedonia. There is a fair amount of traffic to Thessaloniki, but there's very little Turkish in Athens that they'd be interested in visiting. And this is one of the problems with tourists, is that they, in that part of the world, is that they go to visit their own monuments. They don't go to visit the monuments.
No,
of
but
other people.
I think maybe it's a fair point to say that the Greeks who go to Turkey have much more of a pull factor because of the history that they lived there before. And so on,
Exactly.
rather than the other way around, whereas the Turks were there as presumably as sort of government officials and so on. They didn't have the historical hinterland.
Yeah, but the really good Turkish monuments are in Kastoria, they're in Kavala.
Thessaloniki, I mean, you think
but
they
Thessaloniki,
school children
yes.
to see the birthplace
Yeah,
of...
but Thessaloniki, yes, and Thessaloniki attracts a lot of them. But, you know, once you've gone and seen the old Turkish quarter in Kastoria, what's to do in Kastoria? You know, it's a pretty place.
Shopping.
Well,
Don't take your wife because it's a fur center. It's a fur center.
Oh, fur. I see. So you go by.
There's a cultural difference, which is that the Ataturk state told the incomers from the Balkans and from Greece that you've come home and you've come to your security and this is a fresh start. And so the nostalgic aspect of Greeks visiting Constantinople was never encouraged by anything in Turkish history or Turkish culture. They were encouraged to shut the door on the Ottoman past.
Yeah, but those old times, actually, I think my personal experience is the opposite. I was in Mytilene last year, and then I went to Ayvalık, which is populated by lots of Greek Muslims, basically, who were exchanged following the 1923 exchange. And most of them are delighted to go to Crete in particular.
Because
They speak excellent Greek, better than Cypriot Greek. It's embarrassing to talk Cypriot Greek to them because their Greek is sort of Greek. And so my experience is actually the opposite, that the people I met who'd actually gone to Crete and so on were quite a number. They spoke Greek well and they loved going there. By contrast, a taxi driver I met in Mytilene said that I συχαίνομαι τους Turks. So, you know, this is just
But you see, that particular group of people you're talking about
Yeah.
were essentially coming from Crete. They were the Turkish
Yeah,
Britons.
they are great.
And consequently, they feel that they're going back home.
Yeah, they play music, and it's full of Greek music, I believe.
But with respect, Milad,
No.
my point was about the state and the way the state encouraged people to think. I perfectly accept that people can be nostalgic on the personal and popular level, but the integration of the incomers was politically a very different process. That's all.
Well, I mean, politically, I don't know, I mean, Robert might have a view about this, but politically, I mean, Ataturk had to deal with a very extreme situation that a long time ago, the whole empire had sort of disintegrated, and it was being assaulted from various sides, and he had to accommodate the Muslims from Europe and so on, and he had to create a new state. In those circumstances, one can well understand. The question is there a hangover, I think, is your point.
Yeah. Is there a half-life?
Is there a hangover? I mean, have ideas.
But I guess that there are
Let's
at least,
stay home.
there must be at least 10 million middle class or well-to-do Turks nowadays who have traveled abroad and are traveling abroad.
Well, there are hundreds of suffrages all the time.
Precisely. And therefore, to them, this thing might not quite apply. Yes, it might apply to the people in the rural areas and so on, but then again, you would expect that. But these things come also with education and all the rest of it. And
Well, they're not coming as Turks, then they're coming as part of the international bourgeoisie.
Oh,
The
yeah,
same way they
precisely.
come from Shanghai.
Precisely,
They're not
yeah,
Chinese, they're part of the
exactly,
But then the question is,
intelligentsia.
where do you choose to go? Do you say, let's go to Paris, let's go to New York, let's go to London, or let's go to Athens and Salonika? That's the issue. If you're going, where do you want to go? And if you're not going, why don't you want to go?
So the weather and things and swimming and things like that are available.
The same.
They're the same. So you don't have the same sort of motivations that the Europeans or the Germans normally have for going south, I think. What else is there? I mean, there's so much in this paper. I mean, I can't thank you enough, actually, Robert, for taking on this time. I'm just slightly embarrassed that our turnout hasn't been so good. But the quality of it is more.
It's a video. It's
We're not
posted.
in
We will
session.
be.
We will be, yeah.
We will be.
But I am really
open to the world.
Yeah. Any other points?
if I may take you back to that aspect of foreign investment you were talking about, and the reason that it's not so much that Greece does not have the size, because at the end of the day, the size of the market is big enough to create a plant to get economies of scale and all the rest of it. But essentially, a foreign investor is not going necessarily to a place only to serve that particular market, because you have obviously exports which will serve all other markets. And the problem with Greek foreign investment or incoming foreign investment has been essentially one of cost. And the problem there was lost back in, I suppose, the early 80s, when nominal wages rose considerably. And you remember the Papandreou with me. And of course that gave it the death knell. Yes, all the problems of bureaucracy and all the rest of it, but at the same time, when you consider the alternatives and when you consider that labor costs in general are in most other countries, and particularly nowadays following the well, I suppose the end of the Cold War and all the rest of it, you have Central European countries which offer wages or general labor costs at a fraction of the Greek ones. Who will go to Greece? In fact, as you have rightly pointed out in many other writings of yours, Greek firms are closing down there and taking the road to Romania, Slovakia, or whatever else. So it's a question of courts, essentially.
Big Greek wages are roughly 80% in the EU norm at the moment, and when you add Greek social security costs on that, you're probably above the EU norm. So if you are doing legal employment in Greece, it's an expensive place to hire a labour force, and as you've reminded me, if you go far enough east in Eastern Europe these days, you're talking about wage levels that are 20 to 30% of the Greek wage level. Only 8 years ago, I came across an instance where Greeks were cutting shirts in Thrace, shipping the cut fabrics across to Bulgaria, where the wages were so much cheaper. They were sewn and buttons put on. They were exported back into Greece with the common external tariff applied, packaged in Greece and sold as EU products. And it was still cheaper than it was to do it in Greece. Which that's rapidly changing in Bulgaria and Romania.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you go far enough east, people are starting to tap the Ukraine.
Going far enough east. You've got China nowadays.
Well, a lot of Greek firms are moving into China.
So this is the aspect essential, and then we talk about productivity. Now, you have the best example, which is Germany. Tremendous productivity gains and all the rest of it, but huge labor costs. And in order to overcome that, they have to have tremendous amount of investment so that the gains in productivity might still make it on the margin viable to have production in Germany. But even in Germany nowadays, you have lots and lots of manufacturing simply closing down and relocating to places like the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland. And
where you're sorry.
No, still they remain the world's first exporter, so I don't know how they manage.
But it's
yeah, they have a very high value added quality products like
Indeed, a competitive advantage, which we lack, unfortunately.
Well, Greek productivity is very high. It's not something that many people recognize.
Oh, it is high, provided there is the investment there.
But like Germany, the labor cost is equally high. So when you set off the productivity against the labor cost, you don't have.
That's why you need to concentrate in what you can do best. If services are, if shipping, for example, is there, okay.
Well, this is the salvation of the Greek economy. It is services. It's financial services. It's shipping. It's tourism and various other services.
And very few elements of manufacturing. For example, again, the cement industry, which is one of the big pluses, if you like, of the Greek economy.
But it's one of the few. And there are other areas where the Greek economy could develop immensely. If only you could get over some of the traditional backward-looking points of view. For example, Greece could become an educational center, a huge educational center, even more so than Cyprus. If you could ever, and Cyprus is finally getting its act together in order to become an educational center, but Greece could become a global education center.
This is a very big question.
and healthcare.
Yeah.
Because medical tourism.
Medical tourism, spas and thalassotherapy and things like that. But also, Greece is the proportion of doctors in Greece is huge, and the services that are available in those private facilities that are available are also huge. There was a wonderful scheme a few years back whereby a hospital established in Thessaloniki established a system of telemedicine where it was doing diagnostics long distance by computer into places like Romania and Bulgaria. And if the local GP couldn't treat from this televised diagnostic, then the person was shipped to the hospital in Thessaloniki. And there's, you know, why should they come all the way, why should the Middle Eastern people that come all the way up to Harley Street not make their way to Athens? Because Athens has got the capacity in medical terms. The doctors there are first rate. But you cannot get the administrative and the political backup to allow it to function properly.
No, we shouldn't get our hopes up for the Middle East. We should start luring students and clients in general from the Balkans, and then once we have established an infrastructure that is of some merit, then we can attract clients from the Middle East.
Well, I would agree with you. I was thinking, for example, of it,
As a concept.
as Egypt and Jordan as possible sources of medical clientele. It would make much more sense just to fly into Athens than would fly up to London with its expenses.
I totally agree.
The hour.
Well, I mean, the level, yes,
five
the level
hours.
of the quality, there may be problems there. I mean,
No, there isn't. There are not problems. The quality of medical services in Greece
is
are
comparable to you.
are globally high standard. They are
No,
superb.
but are they in relation to the provision of medical services here? I mean,
It can't get any worse than here.
no. The
But
consultants and so on.
I'm talking about on a very limited scale in Greece. This is the problem. The potential is there to expand it on a much larger scale. No, what you're talking about is the huge spectrum of services and large
research.
numbers that are available here. But in Greece, in a very small and focused sector, the quality is as good, if not better.
Now, what you have actually are very well educated and trained people, both in health care, generally doctors and so on and so forth, but also in education, as you mentioned. Greeks have invariably studied abroad. They went back, they can go back or whatever it is. And there is a huge spectrum of education. You have people who were educated in European countries, were educated in the United States and so on and so forth.
Well, Greece is a European country, by the way.
Well, yes, but it is a European country, but traditionally the Greek university could not reproduce itself. In other words, professors had to be trained abroad. PhDs and all the rest of it would be undertaken mostly in foreign universities. They were not very good at the research stage as such. So, as Robert has mentioned, the capacity exists. Whether the setup, whether the institutional changes that are required to for the change to happen, occur or not, is another matter. It is essentially a political story. Various governments in the past have tried to tap onto the vast, as it were, expertise in the Greek diaspora abroad. But of course, that comes to an end when the situation, the microeconomics, if you like, or the micropolitics. The micropolitics are very, very important. And this has been essentially the malaise of the Greek society.
Can I just ask, Robert, just raising this question of the diaspora, what is, well, two questions. Firstly, how many are there in the diaspora, mostly in the United States and Australia, presumably? And secondly, what's the sort of economic contribution of the Greeks abroad?
Okay, can I come back to that?
Yeah,
I'd like
sure.
to add just one thing to what you were saying about the quality of education and in possible private education. I think the best example of this is Alba, which is one of the, I think it ranks in the top 10 business schools in the world in terms of the MBA that it offers. It certainly wins various competitions every year for business plans, etc. But the political climate is such that ALBA stands for the Athens Laboratory of Business Administration. You can't even call it a school.
Never mind the university.
This is, the government will not recognize private education, which is such a silly and narrow-minded point of view.
Why?
Oh, because not-for-profit educational institutions
It
are
comes into conflict with vested interests. Vested interests now there have to do not only with the rectors and the various professors, but also with the perennial students who essentially are running some of these universities. When you get to that stage, then of course this explains why so many Greek, as it were, academics do not want to go back.
It's a very frustrating situation. To try to answer your question, I'm afraid I don't know how many there are in the diaspora, but I think it's something of the order of about half the size of the population in the country.
Really?
But this goes
3
back.
million, 4 million abroad.
Yeah, when you're talking about third generation.
Yeah, what we're talking about, the interwar years, when there was the huge emigration, and at the beginning of the last century as well, when there was a huge emigration. But there was a particular. There's been waves. There was the turn of the century, then there was the interwar years, and then there was a huge migration post the Civil War, when a lot of people who were leftists but not communists were simply excluded from the society, and many of those fetched up in Australia and Canada. So you had a wave to America at the turn of the last century, interwar years. I'm not quite sure what the direction was there, and
yes, then the United States in the 1920s.
Yeah, okay, and then post Second World War, a lot of emigration to the countries of the Commonwealth, South Africa, Australia, Canada, and increasing, and also I was about to say increasingly into Europe, to Germany in particular. And their contribution to the economy once upon a time was absolutely vital in terms of remittances. But emigrants' remittances are no longer a major factor in the balance of payments, except in terms of the property market, where everybody who has emigrated and made some money has this dream of coming back and investing it someplace at some time. And so there is a constant flow of money into the country, but relative to the overall economy and relative to the overall size of the balance of payments, it's much smaller than it was, say, 20 years ago.
I'm going to have to leave you, Robert, myself now. I'm sorry, but
thank you for being such a helpful chair.
Thanks very much, and see you soon.
Okay. Enjoy your dinner.
We'll come back. We're welcome to stay for a while longer, but
if anybody's got anything to say, that's fine. I'm willing to stay.
Leave that. Should I leave that up?
Do you want to take it with you? We've got it on video.
That means it'll send me a chip back here.
I was actually a visitor in this conversation, but I couldn't help listening to your insights with much interest. And cutting to the chase, what I wanted to ask is whether you consider that this spillover effect that you have described can in fact enhance the rapprochement process between the two countries. Now, from what I understood, you argue in favor of this stance. However, I couldn't help detecting some hesitation in your position. So I would like you to elaborate a little bit more on that.
When you say the spillover effect, I'm sorry.
Because this is a term that comes from the theory from international relations, and it talks about the way that economic diplomacy, for example, for one thing, could lead to the normalization of relations between two countries. because when you have a number of when you have an established network in terms of businesses, chances are that you don't jeopardize the relations that you have with another country, and that politically your discourse becomes less acute and less provocative and so on. So, and this is described as a spillover effect because from one sector to another.
All right. Constantine makes that point in his paper that while the contacts and the investments, etc., are a good thing. The subtitle of his paper, which is Greek Turkish Economic Cooperation, the subtitle is "Guarantor of Détente or Hostage to Politics," and I think his point of view is that if there were something that prompted another confrontation over in the Aegean, that all this gradual build-up under the rapprochement process would be very rapidly swept aside. I'm not sure. I think it is very hard, once you have done business with somebody, to then spit in his face, as it were, and say, I won't talk to you anymore. And I think that over time, if this rapprochement process continues, we are going to see the economic actors shaping the actions of the political actors rather than vice versa. I don't think we've reached that point yet, which is why I made the remarks in my conclusion to the effect that let's hope that this action against the AKP doesn't lead to it being turfed from office and it being replaced with, say, another government like the Egypt government, which is uncertain of its position and determined to take some international action, such as Cyprus, to bolster its position at home and foster some of its other private concerns. That's still a possibility. You know, we haven't reached the point where the amity is such that it's irreversible. But I think it would be much, much harder to reverse the amity that has grown under the rapprochement process now than it would have 2 or 3 years ago. And I think that if this continues for another 4 or 5 years, then, as I say, I think it will be the economic actors, it will be the dog wagging the tail, it will be the economic actors telling the politicians what to do.
But presumably this is precisely where, this is a well-trodden, actually, policy. After all, the European Union was built like that. In 1951, only 6 years after the end of the Second World War, you had the first, as it were, get-together of the six to set up the European Community of Coal and Steel. Now, they were not about coal and steel and so on.
Robert, would you be willing to predict a sort of a critical mass level of economic engagement that would be required? You mentioned, is it one bank? Is it two banks?
Yeah, no, I can't.
That's crystal ball.
Yeah, no, I can't really do that. I do think that it is not enough yet. And the only investor in Turkey that stands to really take a bath if there was some sort of huge reverse would be National. National has ridden out riots in Fyrom, it's ridden out riots in Serbia. Now, the Fyrom in Serbia are not Turkey, but National is a big international bank, and it rides out crises the same way American banks ride out anti-American activities in the Far East or in India or wherever. You know, Citibank doesn't go home because of a riot in India. And National is of that stature, so I don't think National will be hurt. But I don't think the critical mass has reached that size yet, and it won't until we see more Greek investors established in Turkey. What I would like to see, I wanted to say one thing in terms of what you had to say. There is a growing, and I wanted to come back and finish what I was going to say, but there is a growing sensibility in Greece that the Greek Turkish rapprochement is the French-German rapprochement all over again. And this is a sensibility that wasn't there a few years ago. It is now beginning to permeate people's thoughts that if the French and the Germans can do it, we can do it. And where I see the greatest possible benefit is in Turkish manufacturing and construction and architectural skills, combining with Greek monetary, Greek investment and banking and service skills in things like accounting and consulting, etc., in more joint ventures like this Helakter Enka joint venture in Oman, where you've got an outside, in that case it happens to be an outside source of money, but there is no good reason why National Bank could not have financed that project, and it probably is, it's probably got a line on the loans somewhere, and be quite happy to take a line on the loans, because the Omanis are going to be good for the money, because it's largely American money, and that kind of joint project could be very valuable and cement relations. If Greece and Turkey were to go into the Ukraine together, or if Greece and Turkey were to go into East Africa or West Africa together, they could do wonders, I think, because they both have the ideas that know how to deal.
They may be complementing each other, in other words, in particular areas.
They do complement one another in particular areas. Finance versus construction, or construction versus architecture, etc. And they both understand how to deal with difficult third world countries, and they could do wonders in terms of exporting their skills and expertise.
Seems a long way away.
I don't think it's all that long way away. Sorry.
No, the hope is, as you mentioned, that the internal problems now in Turkey between the government and the
parasite,
as it were,
the deep state.
Yes, the deep state. To talk about, it is still a major problem. And this is really what also, it's not simply a question of Greek-Turkish relationships, it's also the relationship of Turkey with the rest of the world. Because if, as it were, the generals were to do all those things, and at the end of the day, let's have another takeover, then that would mean a closed door to Europe for at least another 30 years.
Mm. Well, this is the thing that is going to perhaps be the insurance policy.
It's not so much, in other words, what will happen to a number of investors, including the National Bank of Greece and Turkey, to their investments. It is what will happen to Turkey itself.
Yeah. Well, this is both an insurance problem and a concern for Greece, namely that Turkey does have its candidacy. Turkey, provided there isn't some major political disaster, will become a European Union. It will secure accession, whether or not that will be approved, depending upon French, for example, a mentality at the time where if the French do insist in 2014 on a referendum, then we're faced with a whole new ballgame. But in broad terms, the Turks are committed to accession. The European Community has said you will be a member in the next budgetary horizon, i.e. after 2013. You can't be a member in this budgetary horizon. So the Turks realize that 2014 and or after, provided there is no upheaval in Turkey which rejects the commitment to Europe, then Turkey will be accepted as a European member, maybe with transitional clauses. We've seen transitional clauses in other members' accession. Then it will be up to Europe whether there is an acceptance, whether or not the governments, whether the council contradicts what the Commission has agreed with the Turks. This will be a major political issue at the time. So that is a huge cushion for Greek-Turkish relations, that so long as Turkey pursues that course, Greece has this guarantee that Turkey is pursuing a European course and is happy to continue to cooperate. The concern for Greece must be that if and when Turkey does become a member, Greece is going to become an even more minor member, because Turkey is going to be a hugely powerful member of the European community. 80 million people, one of the richest, it's got more natural resources than any other current member of the European community, unless they extend to Ukraine. No other European community, no other European nation has uranium. No other European Commission has cobalt. They've got huge numbers of resources that is going to make Turkey, it's going to give it very great leverage. And Greece, which has been, as it were, the funnel for Turkey into Europe, unless it's established very good relations with Turkey, could find itself trailing in its wake yet again.
I suppose.
Shall we leave the last question to our cameraman, David, who's been filming but not had a chance to ask a question?
Thank you.
Yes?
I just wanted to ask what the view might be on the new French initiative, and I think that goes on from the point about the relationship between Turkey and the EU, and to what extent is France preparing a fallback plan if Turkish accession to the EU flounders, of offering some kind of a deal of association through a Mediterranean Union?
And well, this is partly what I was saying. There are three nations in Europe that at the moment are politically declared not to want Turkey to be a full member, and this is Austria, France, and Germany to a lesser extent. France tried to create this Mediterranean Union, which it saw, as I understand it, as an alternative venue to which Turkey could be party without it necessarily becoming a full party to all of Europe. Interestingly, France was finessed on that by Germany, that insisted that you couldn't have a subset, as it were, of the European Union, even if the majority of the members of that Mediterranean Union were not EU members, but it would have included a number of EU members, including Greece and Italy and France and Spain and Portugal. Germany said, you can't do this. If you're going to have some sort of an organization that is EU-oriented, it's got to be all EU 27. And so the French now find themselves with the Mediterranean Union, which has got all their EU partners in it, and they've lost the initiative that they might have had in finessing Turkey in this way, if that was the intention to do it. Say again?
It was a half-baked plan. I mean, they wanted somehow to to give something away to Turkey. And they thought about that sort of thing without realizing precisely the kind of problems that the Germans had pointed out to them.
I don't think Turkey was the issue in this. I think the French were looking to extend their influence in North Africa. And Turkey, and as a vehicle in which to finesse Turkey and its advance on Europe, it happened to be convenient. But I don't think Turkey was the prime focus of that at all. I think it was France trying to re-establish greater influence, perhaps at the expense of the European Union, back in Tunisia, back in Algeria, back in Morocco, and to a lesser extent in some